Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are merging the streams here on the website from all things sports and keeping our sports identity and our brand within the Baltimore Positive platform. Hope you go ahead and check that out this week, especially during an election week. We've had former Governor Martin O'Malley on, current Congressman John Sarbanes, a whole bunch of congressmen, whole bunch of House of Representatives folks, a whole bunch of journalists, and a whole bunch of insiders on both sides of the aisle to join us. So we hope you're digging that. All of it brought to you by our friends King Discount Liquors, Lottery, Beer, Booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Paul King taking care of us. We've been ordering alcohol by the case during the pandemic. I recommend that to all my friends out there. Also our friends over at Costas, good enough for the Today Show. My mom's favorite place, and I miss just sitting down in the bar and watching a ball game with a proper draft beer and a crab cake. With Pete over there at Costas, but they are still carrying out. Crabs are delicious. Crab cakes are delicious. The crab soup's delicious. I haven't had the crab imperial lately, but I'm sure it's delicious, and that probably means I should go get some. So stop by and see our friends over at Costas. Give them some love as well. Luke, these weeks after you lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't know if they go fast or they go slow. We're off to Indianapolis. We've talked about all that represents, but last week we were talking about the defense and how good the defense was going to be and where this was and how they could jettison Earl Thomas and get better and how they're going to give money to Marlon Humphrey. This week there's going to be so much oxygen taken up, by the loss, Pittsburgh, Lamar, Ronnie Stanley, that we're not going to talk as much about the defense, but let's talk about the defense and let's talk about the new acquisition as well as Matt Judon sort of losing his cool in a game where if you lose your cool and you win, it's okay. When you lose your cool and you lose, Matt Judon's got a lot of splaining to do this week.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people will talk about, was the contact with the official deliberate, intentional or not? I mean, I think you look at the video and I think it was pretty apparent it wasn't intentional. But at the same time, when you lose your cool and you lose your composure and you're out of control out there, you kind of leave yourself up to taking the chance of something like that happening, quite frankly. And it's something that, for as good as Matt Judon has been as a player, and regardless of whether he's a franchise tag caliber player or a great player, he's certainly been a very good player over the years, but that was a mistake. And while I can't necessarily pinpoint something specific that was impacted, just not having him on the field, potentially making a big play at some point. You can look at, Yannick Ngakoue played, of course, didn't make a monster impact, but Ben Roethlisberger was getting the ball out very quickly. But one guy I do look at who benefited from Judon not being out there, presumably, is Jalen Ferguson, who I thought played a darn good football game, had a sack, had a tackle for a loss. I thought he set the edge well on a couple occasions. That was an interesting time for him to perform at a high level with Yannick Ngakoue coming into the picture now.
Well, also in a Steelers game, too, to your point, right? Like Jalen Ferguson, a guy that we haven't seen a whole lot of, but we didn't see a whole lot of Matt Judon early on in his career when he was on the block around the corner out there in Owings Mills. And, younger players, it takes them a little while. Bowser's a guy we're all waiting on, right?
Sure. I mean, and some guys like Bowser become a steadier role player, but maybe not the guy that you hoped he could be when you drafted him in the second round. But, overall, I look at the defense and they gave up 4.4 yards per play. Ben Roethlisberger did not put up overly impressive numbers in that game. I mean, Matt Judon, ironically, was the one who talked about needing to have those catch tackles. And what that means are those short 3, 4, 5 yard throws. Yeah, you can let them complete a good number of those, but make the tackle right away. Make it a 3-yard gain rather than missing a tackle and it turns into an 11-yard gain and you're moving the chains. But, Roethlisberger had 182 yards on 32 attempts. I mean, that's nothing to write home about. You look at the depth of target. He wasn't pushing the ball down the field. But the only thing you could really say about the defense is in the second half, Pittsburgh recognized, and this is where I do give their offensive coaching staff some credit here, they recognized that they were not running the ball whatsoever with any level of consistency. So you get to a point where you can continue to beat your head against a brick wall or you adjust. So what did the Steelers do? They basically went 4 wide, 1 tight end. They went a lot of empty, and Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers were able to spread the Ravens out, and they were able to complete some passes in that way. And part of what that did was it also caused the Ravens, who we know have had some injuries in the secondary and lost Anthony Averett. They let Marcus Gilchrist go, who had been their dime back as a third safety their last 2 games, but clearly they weren't satisfied with what he was doing. So it put them in a position where Terrell Bonds came onto the field as a fourth corner, and we saw him have some issues. Now, he's not the reason they lost the game or anything like that, but it allowed Pittsburgh to start moving the ball a little more frequently. And when you couple that with Roethlisberger getting the ball out quicker than ever, I mean, he entered the week with the quickest time to throw in the National Football League among quarterbacks from snap until release. And I mean, that's something that he's gotten, quicker and quicker over the last few years, but this year especially. So, those blitzes aren't getting home then when the ball's coming out in 2 seconds. I mean, I don't care who it is coming off the edge. You're not going to get to the quarterback 2 seconds after the snap. I mean, it's going to take a little bit longer than that more often than not. So the pass rush was largely negated, and they were able to do just enough in the second half. But again, you kind of look at the final numbers. You see the final, the total yardage, and you remember, oh yeah, your quarterback gifted them 14 points essentially. I mean, did gift them 7, and then the other touchdown came on, an interception that put Pittsburgh inside the red zone to start the drive. A minute into the second quarter, their second drive of the half. So, I mean, it's, you look at it from that standpoint, and the defense wasn't perfect in the second half, and had some untimely penalties, a couple of them questionable in the eyes of many Ravens fans, but the defense didn't lose them this game. The defense played incredibly well for most of the game. And even in the second half, where Pittsburgh did find some ways to move the ball, it's not as though they gave up 4 or 5 touchdowns in the second half. I mean, this was still a game that you can continue to go back to the penalties and some of the self-inflicted mistakes. And yeah, they had some of those on defense, but you come back
when
to
your
the quarterback
gives up 14, that's the story. I mean,
right.
There's no more, there's no less, right?
I mean, unless your expectation is you're going to shut out the Steelers, I mean, I don't know how you can really look at the defense and be all that terribly upset. Like I said.
But what I guess my point was, we're going to talk about the offense. We're going to talk about Ronnie Stanley and all of that. The defense is not going to get a whole lot of oxygen here this week, even though they're seeing Phillip Rivers, right?
Well, and I think we've talked about this, and this becomes an even more relevant now. We've talked about the fact that this offense, for all of its middle-of-the-road success, and look, they've still managed to average right around 30 points a game. Let's be clear about that. But how has that happened? Because of turnovers, because of having the best starting field position in the NFL this year. Now, losing Ronnie Stanley and knowing what impact that's going to have on your offensive line. Now, with Lamar Jackson coming off of his worst game in 2 years and him kind of going the wrong way at the moment. Not that I think that that's going to continue necessarily, but until he turns it around, you've got to be concerned, right? So those issues on offense, and maybe even looking at the running game and how effective that was, if we're looking at on the bright side for the offense, it really feeds into the defense really needing to set the tone for this football team. And that's probably going to continue now. As much as we were kind of waiting for this offense because it was such a record-setting, magical, special group last year, now you kind of look at things and you say, I think they can get better. I think there are things they can do to be better, but maybe the ship sailed on setting records again this year. Maybe the ship has sailed on Lamar Jackson being MVP again. But it doesn't mean they can't make some improvements, but it really is feeling more and more. And I even said this at one point, probably right after Stanley left the game on the cart, that, I said that I felt like the defense was going to have to win then that game at that point, and clearly they came up short. But you feel more and more, and maybe not against Indianapolis quite as much. Certainly, not necessarily against New England the way they're struggling, but when you go up against Tennessee, when you go up against Pittsburgh again, maybe when you go to Cleveland on that Monday night in mid-December, those are games where you might be saying, yeah, the defense is probably going to have to really lead the way if you're going to take care of business and win those football games. So something that we weren't necessarily talking about at the beginning of the season, but here we are. We have a defense that is playing much better than this offense at this point. And when you look at how the offense, what they're doing best, it's running the ball. But it's more skewed and more dramatic and more pronounced than it was a year ago. So Maybe you go back to 2 years ago.
And by the way, not as effective. They're not running the ball and getting 7 and 8 on first down and then living in 2nd and 1 and 2nd and 2. Those days are gone. And I'm glad we had as much fun with it as we did because it was fun.
But they did it Sunday, though, and they did it against a damn good run defense. So my point, I guess, is as much as we're kind of waiting for this passing game to take off, you lose your left tackle. We'll see if they bring someone else in. We'll see what Dez Bryant looks like. I assume we're going to see him sooner rather than later, especially after another substandard passing day for the Ravens. But it does feel maybe you have to go back and channel 2018 a little bit more, which as much as everyone was going gaga over Lamar and this running game that was so strange, and we talked about it, how it was, bumper pool or the electric football where everyone's just kind of bumping into each other. Remember, that defense played at a fantastic level down the stretch. And that was why they were able to play that way, because you need to be able to pass the ball in this league. I mean, you do. And they didn't do that particularly well down the stretch Lamar's rookie year. And no knock on him. He was a rookie. But you do wonder if they're going to have to lean more in that direction to win games, which will work against most of the teams left on their schedule. Is that formula going to work in January, though? That's where I have my doubts, and that's where we do talk about the ceiling of this football team being lowered a little bit. Not that it's impossible to overcome, but it's going to be difficult to overcome that now, not having your franchise left tackle protecting your quarterback's blind side.
Everyone will be talking about Ronnie Stanley and Lamar Jackson and the loss to the Steelers and 2 games behind. Luke Jones will be in Owings Mills all week long, election or no election at all. We're going to have an election here. Pennsylvania, make sure you get out on Tuesday and vote, and we'll all be watching all of that out at Baltimore Positive. Don Moeller's got a whole bunch of guests lined up for later on in the week. I am allegedly going to Indianapolis this weekend, but there's been a snafu on the flights and game times and whatnot, so I'm not even sure that I'm going to make it out there. You think they'll miss me if I don't go to Indianapolis, Luke? I think they'll make it, won't they?
I think they'll miss you.
That's very kind of you to say that. Okay, you have seen the hospitality with which I've been treated when I'm in Indianapolis.
You have to go to St. Elmo's, right, and get the shrimp cocktail that everyone goes gaga over?
I'm going over to Costas and get the shrimp cocktail.
I'd prefer that one as well.
No, it's nearby as well.
Yeah.
So,
and it's better.
And it's not in Indianapolis. So let's
there you go. There you go.
Let me check the weather in Indianapolis as well. It's always like 50 degrees colder there. So that's our week around here. I want to give thanks to all of our sponsors. Planet Fitness is warm inside there. We had the Bricks on last month. I'm going to grab Vicky Brick at some point later on this month too, talk some fitness with her. But I had Victor on, had Lynn on. They were doing a big thing in October for the John W. Brick Foundation. They usually do a 5K, and they do a Wim Hof ice bath experience. But for you, it's simple. It's just $10 a month. Just go to Planet Fitness. It's safe. It's around the corner. Plenty of locations and still building more. I saw them open one recently out on Facebook. So I know they're still opening. It's tough times for everybody, but you don't want to go into this winter not taking care of yourself and being in the best shape of your life. Try that at Planet Fitness. Also, our friends at Sporticulture. The Magma lamp here. All the magma's kind of stuck up top here right now. I don't know, maybe we could put 45 on the Colts this weekend and feel better about ourselves before it's all over with. But the Ravens Magma lamp, yeah, you can get a Colts Magma lamp or a Washington football team. Maybe they'll give you a big W. Put the big W under there. Get the burgundy and gold. Sporticulture is really known for their flowers. Walnut Springs, my pal Court's out on near Frederick, just out west, out 70 west. And growing beautiful flowers, but now does this incredible sports novelty brand at sporticulture.com. We have it all up over the website. You can check that out as well. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Pump some gas over the weekend. I need some tenders. I've been featuring the Western fries out on the front of the box. I could turn it this way and do the world-famous chicken. But I think the Western fries are underrated, and now that we're getting into winter, I'm going to dip them in ketchup. You know they have gravy there, too. They have scrapple on the breakfast sandwiches at Royal Farms. I did not know this. I don't eat scrapple. But now that Don Moeller knows this, at some point, next week, Moeller's going to be standing, eating a selfie, like eating scrapple out of a waffle sandwich and posting selfies once he finds out. But that won't happen until Thursday. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm still on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and was all over Twitter on Sunday because I get to sit on the couch while Luke has a box lunch at the Ravens games. And these 4 o'clock games and the red zone and what's going on around the league and what the Bengals are doing and what the Bills are doing. And, and I certainly don't want to sleep on the Colts because we're going to see them this week and we'll see Tennessee. But a lot of these teams have gotten sort of better lately, right? Not the Jets, but we're not going to sleep on the Bengals and the Browns a second time around because they are improving football teams right now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you give the Bengals credit. I mean, who saw that coming? Them beating Tennessee on Sunday. Now, on the flip side, there had been so much discussion in Cleveland about Baker Mayfield and potentially being better without Odell Beckham Jr. Well, they scored 6 points on Sunday. So, look, the Browns are going to be in it because we're talking about a 7-team field now rather than 6. So, they have a winning record. You give them credit for that. They've looked okay at times.
Say that again, a 7-team field now, not a 6. Say that again because I'm not sure everybody processes that.
It's 7 teams making the playoffs now and one team that gets the first round bye. That's why we've talked, and some people might even suggest we've obsessed too much about Kansas City, but it's where you are right now. We don't know if there's going to be a bona fide home field advantage or not knowing what's going to happen, whether there'll be a bubble, everything that's related to the pandemic. Can speculate about that all day. We don't know, but we know there's going to be a 7-team playoff field. So if the season were to end today, as much as I hate doing that because it's such a silly concept because we're not even, some teams aren't even halfway through their schedule like the Ravens. But if the season were to end today, the Cleveland Browns would be the 7 seed. Indianapolis would be the 6. The Ravens would be the 5 seed and going on the road in the first round. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. I mean, and that's why with the Ravens having already lost to Kansas City, that hurt you. It stings. You move on. But this is why the loss to Pittsburgh on Sunday has you questioning: are the Ravens truly a Super Bowl contender, or are they just in that rock solid playoff team kind of level that everyone else? The Tennessee.
But they don't get to prove anything other than that until January the 7th or 8th, whatever date that is, right?
Well, I mean, if you go to Pittsburgh now. If you go to Pittsburgh on Thanksgiving night now, certainly you feel better about them than you do after Sunday's loss.
But it doesn't matter if you lose to Pittsburgh. I mean, I hate to be crass about it. I know we felt that way when we walked out of the stadium dejected back in January before the plague set in, right? That sounds weird, but it's true. There really is no measurement other. I mean, they played well enough on Sunday. If Lamar takes back 2 picks that, quite frankly, of all the things we've seen him do over – going back to Canton that night when he was running headfirst in the linebackers 2 years and 2 months ago now, right? Feels like an eternity ago, right? But that's how long ago it's been that we look at him and say, how many really awful passes? Like, he threw 2 in one game. Like, those are really, like, that's abnormal for him. I don't think he'll throw a lot of those. I don't think that's what he does. I think he'll learn from that. But if you take the game into totality and say they outplayed the Steelers for 3.5 quarters and managed to lose the game because the quarterback had a couple of bad plays, I'm not ready to kick them in the nose about that, or even the second loss or being behind or whatever the road or the bubble represents for January. But the only thing that's going to matter is what they do in January and what Buffalo team they see or what Tennessee, any of these teams are really dangerous for them because they're not really better than any of these teams measurably because they don't have this big quarterback that throws 6 touchdowns over your head. They can be neutralized, and they have been neutralized. And once they're neutralized and down 10 points, they have no track record of being able to score 14 points in the fourth quarter in the air and beat you quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair assessment. I mean, they kind of have that front runner mentality or reputation, not mentality, that, when things are going well and you're playing your game and you can dictate tempo and you can stay on script, things are great, right?
Yeah, that's really easy when you get a $13 million guard headed to the Hall of Fame and a left tackle coming into his prime playing to get a $100 million contract. You know what I mean? Like, that's who they were this time last year. Who they are this week getting off the bus in Indianapolis is who they are, right? Orlando Brown's going to play left tackle, and we're going to figure out the rest of it. And, we have some nice talent positions, and we have this incredible quarterback. But the notion that Marshall, Yond, and Stanley are gone now, kicks a little bit of the sail out of, again, and I said this earlier, Luke, when the Yonda, not Yonda, excuse me, when the Stanley injury happened on Sunday, I was heating up my Pizza John's cheesesteak. And when I saw him, like, I saw how bad it was instantly. You go back to the Twitter, down and bad, awful. Like, I saw the look on his face. You know, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. It didn't take me much to figure it out. I got up and I walked past my wife, and I'm like, they can't win a Super Bowl without Ronnie Stanley. That was just the first words out of my mouth. Like, and I might have been Eric DeCosta or Pat Moriarty up in the – I mean, I'm thinking when they're watching that and I'm watching that, I'm like, oh – well, I don't know that they can really be the team they want to be over the next 12 weeks without him.
Well, and let's face it, and I said this when you mentioned this before, it's never truly 100% over unless you've lost your franchise quarterback, if you have a franchise quarterback. And if you don't, then you're not talking about championships anyway.
Well, unless you have Nick Foles.
Unless you have – or Trent Dilfer back in the day. But – it does become that much more difficult. And anyone that wants to say, well, they can overcome that. Well, my retort to that would be, well, then why did they just give him $100 million contract if he's not that critical, if he's not that important to their success? He is. And the Ravens, they telegraphed how important he was by paying him on Friday. So, yeah, it's difficult. And, yeah, it really stinks. And it's a challenge. And it's something that they're going to, that's going to be a concern week in and week out. And it's not to say Brown can't be respectable at left tackle. It's not to say that DJ Fluker can't be passable at right tackle, although, you know, he's been a right guard for a long time for a reason, because he wasn't good enough there several years back, and they moved him inside in San Diego and, you know, elsewhere. But, I mean, it's tough. But I will say this. And, yeah, we can be dismissive about Lamar Jackson and say, well, you know, he typically doesn't turn the ball over 4 times a game. Agreed. Of course he doesn't. But go back to that Cincinnati game. We were talking about those 3 passes that easily could have or should have been intercepted. He had some shaky throws against Philadelphia. And even on Sunday, Joe Hayden dropped an interception. I mean, that easily could have been 3. So we're seeing him make throws that he consistently did not make last year, and him not taking care of the ball. And suddenly, I mean, he fumbled one time on Sunday without even being touched. That's what we saw during his rookie season. So I don't want to say it's this hard, panic-driven regression, but he's got to play better. And some of the mistakes that he made on Sunday had absolutely nothing to do with Ronnie Stanley not being on the field. So when you are someone who's won an MVP, and you are someone that this team is going to make a historic financial investment in at some point over the next 12 to 18 months, presumably, then you got to play better. And it's going to be more challenging for him now. I think you look at his ceiling now and say, when you don't have Ronnie Stanley, it's going to be more challenging after already losing Marshall Yonda to retirement. But I think it's more than fair to say you need more out of Lamar Jackson than what he's done over the last 3 or 4 weeks. As I said, go back to his numbers. You know, I mean, Cleveland had a fantastic game, had a really good day in Houston. Since then, his passing numbers aren't so hot. I mean, just go look at the numbers. He's right around an 80 passer rating, and, you know, not completing nearly as many passes. And now the last few weeks, we've seen more of those interceptable passes, if you will, that some of them hadn't been caught, but a couple of them were on Sunday. And, I mean, this is a team that the way their offense is currently constructed with their offensive line, knowing that they don't have dynamic weapons at wide receiver and tight end, they have 1 or 2 guys, and we've talked about it at length, needing a third option to step forward. Maybe it is Willie Snead. Maybe I'm selling Willie short, but, you know, I have 2 years of evidence suggesting it's not going to be him. Maybe it will be Des Bryant, but this is certainly an offense that's operating from a smaller margin for error. When you're relying on the run as much as you do, we've talked about it. If you don't get 6 yards on first down, 7 yards on first down, this offense just doesn't run as smoothly as it did last year. So the challenge is going to be doing that consistently enough to not put your defense in bad positions. And certainly we saw that happen on Sunday.
Luke can be found, Luke at WNST.net. He will be on the backfields at Owings Mills as the Ravens try to figure out the offensive flow, figure out the Indianapolis Colts, and we try to figure out the rest of the league, right? It has been a great year for football, like to watch football games that even when I have my laptop up and my website's crashing, I'm trying to work on social media and trying to work on building stuff and doing all these cool things for all of our cool new sponsors. The games have been good. I mean, against what baseball was and the NBA and the NHL and what sports is. And I saw a tradition unlike any other, the Masters in 2 weeks. So I saw they're doing that, and football's been good. Football's been really good.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, it's as you can relate to now, since you've done some road games, it's certainly different being there. And I think even for the 4,300 Ravens fans that were in attendance on Sunday, they would certainly say it's not the same in that way. But when you're watching the product as a TV viewer, when you're consuming it in that way, you kind of get lost and forget about the fact that there aren't fans there. And, whether they're piping in just enough crowd noise or whatever.
Dude, it's like when you're in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, you know, it's real to you when you're in it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that suspension of disbelief. We've talked, I probably uttered that phrase 24 times.
Well, you have to have it in order to do any of this, right?
Yeah, yes. But you're right. It's been enjoyable, and, it's been surprising. It's never dull. Every time you think you have things figured out, you see the Titans lose at Cincinnati. Every time you think you have things figured out, you see the Vikings, do what they did against Green Bay. I mean, who saw that coming? I mean, the Vikings just signaled that they were punting on the rest of the season by trading Ngakoue to the Ravens. So, you have those weird outcomes like that, and then you have the Jets, who are just absolutely a disaster. And
all I say when I put them on is Flacco playing and is he alive? That's all that's.
Can I be totally honest? And I have great affection for Joe.
It's time for Joe to go home.
I think it's time for Joe to go home and be with his kids. I mean, at this point, it's not like anything that's happening there is going to help him get a job elsewhere. I mean, can he hang around as a backup quarterback another year or two? Maybe. But why? Why? He's made so much money. He's got a shiny Super Bowl ring. He's going to be in the Ravens Ring of Honor. He's the kind of guy that if he wants to make some appearances and kiss babies and shake hands, I guess in a post-pandemic world anyway, that the Ravens, I'm sure, would be thrilled to have him doing those types of things, and they'd love it for their corporate sponsors and all of that. Go home, man. I mean, he's 35 years old at this point. I think it's time. Look, it's his decision just as it's any player's decision in that case.
Well, if he would have been the backup in Dallas, he might have had, a chance to go in and do what Andy Dalton did, right? Whatever.
Although that hasn't worked out either.
But when you sign up with a team that's going to go 3-13 without you and going to have a hard time getting to 3, quite frankly, at this point.
They might not get one at this point.
Well, that's part of right. I mean, that's
I
part
think
of
they will, but oof.
Who against whom? Would be nice to be the Patriots,
right.
wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah, that would be nice. I mean, and that's as much as we talked about the league and it being, hey, the Patriots are 2-5 right now.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
And I will be the first to admit, I did not see this coming from the standpoint of if you had asked me who was going to be more successful, Bill Belichick without a 43-year-old Tom Brady, or a 43-year-old Tom Brady starting over in a new city with a new organization, I would have guessed Belichick. And I'm not saying I thought the Patriots were going to win the Super Bowl, but I thought Brady was going to look like 2015 Peyton Manning this year. I thought it was going to – I thought it'd fall apart quickly for him.
Because it did for Joe Namath in L.A., and it did for Burt Jones in San Diego, and it did for Joe Flacco in Denver, and, it does for everybody, literally.
And that's the thing. He's 43.
Brett Favre ran around with the Jets, remember?
but even some of these guys who had late career success, and Joe Montana was pretty solid his first year with Kansas City, second year not so much. But all of these guys, typically they hit age 40 if they're still around by then, and they fall off a cliff. And we saw that with Peyton Manning, whatever his age was his last year. I mean, he absolutely fell off a cliff. Instead, and I'll say this, he did pick a good spot to go to, because you look at the talent, and we'll see what happens with Antonio Brown from a personality standpoint and off-field standpoint for them. But Tampa Bay got a good defense. They have had some injuries to some of their pass
He
catchers,
also got a
but he's
Zen
playing
coach.
well.
I mean, Bruce Arians, one of the
Sure.
greatest guys to ever walk the planet.
Sure, but even with those variables, I was very skeptical that was going to work out. And look, maybe he falls apart in the second half of the year, but he's playing. He looks better than he has over the last couple of years.
I've been tempted to text Ryan Jensen. Jensen and I are uptight. I know, I see the hair.
Ask him about the towel to present the sweat, to present the swamp. You know what?
You know what? I'm going to get Jensen on at some point because we're Facebook friends and we go after each other once in a while. After the election, things calm down a little bit in a couple of weeks. So I'll try to get Jensen on a Zoom for us, and we can ask him what it's like to play with Tom Brady because I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, no doubt. But on the flip side, I mean, as I said, I didn't expect New England to be a championship caliber team this year, but I did think they'd be better than what they've been. I mean, look at how they played the first couple of weeks. I mean, Cam Newton looked good. They went to Seattle, and I know they lost that game, but that was a hell of an exciting and close game. And you're thinking, wow, the Patriots, maybe they're going to be better off without Tom Brady. And since then, they had, Cam gets the virus, and they have scheduling challenges, and they aren't able to practice, and some of the warts have been exposed. That's just a roster that doesn't have enough talent on either side of the ball at this point. So not to say the Ravens just show up there and expect to win. It is New England. It is Foxborough, and you got to go up there and play sharp. But they are not looking anything like a playoff caliber team, and they fell to 2-5. I mean, boy, when was the last time the Patriots were 2-5? I mean, are we talking pre-Parcells there? Are we talking pre-Drew Bledsoe there, or maybe Bledsoe's rookie year? I mean, it's been a long time since the Patriots have been that bad. So, that's just been interesting to see how that has played out, where Tom Brady is thriving and looking good, and the Buccaneers are looking like one of the best teams in football through the first 7 weeks. And meanwhile, the Patriots, looks like the party's over. Looks like
Tale
the
of two
dynasty
cities.
is over. Yeah. So it's been interesting, but your overall point, I agree. It's been a fun season. It's been more frustrating for the Ravens than I think many local fans anticipated, to say the least. But
what'd you want? You wanted 7-0 and then to beat everybody 45-6. They did that last year.
Yeah, and that's and
none of that means anything if they second week of January do a facer in the snow to Josh Allen, right?
I'm glad you said that, and that's where some perspective is in order here. As much as it stinks to lose Ronnie Stanley, and that's not something to be dismissive about.
You got to go win 3 games in January, no matter who you are.
And that's the thing.
And I don't, and when I say those 3 games are going to be Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Kansas City, San Diego, Buffalo, Tennessee, Buffalo, Kansas City, Pittsburgh. You pick any of, spin the wheel, and you got to go beat those 3 teams here, there, Arizona, Bubble, Bahamas with Chris Pica, wherever they're going to play. You have to go win those 3 games, then go win a Super. Then go beat Russell Wilson, right? Or whomever shows up over there, Drew Brees, whatever it is, right?
And you never know what the draw is going to be. You don't know who's going to wake up on the wrong side of the bed like the Ravens did last January. You don't know who's going to lose their quarterback. You
thought you woke up on the right side of the bed. You had a bye, and you had the lowly Tennessee Titans coming in here, And all you need to do is tackle the fat guy and have your guy run around and razzle-dazzle and make it on 4th and 1, and you were okay because you'd done that for 17 weeks. Well, didn't go so well in week 18.
And this is where, if you're a Ravens fan looking for optimism, you look at the history of this organization, you look at the DNA of this organization. The Ravens have always thrived as being the underdog. We saw what it was like last year being the team that everyone was talking about and everyone was picking to win the Super Bowl. Number 1 seed, home field advantage throughout. We can remember years where Steve Bisciotti lamented not having a home playoff game and talking about that as a critique of John Harbaugh or Brian Billick in a previous era. But we saw how that worked out. The 2 best regular season teams in franchise history were 2019 and 2006. 2000 Ravens went 5 straight games without scoring a touchdown. The 2012 Ravens lost 3 games in a row going into December and fired their offensive coordinator and got blown out by Denver at home. It looked awful. And then you saw how it can change. And, to use the Kansas City comparison, the Kansas City Chiefs looked better in 2018 in the regular season than they did last year. They scored 20 more offensive touchdowns in 2018 than they did last year. And you saw what happened. They won a Super Bowl. So not saying that the Ravens are going to do that, and certainly it becomes much more difficult having lost your franchise left tackle that you just paid 48 hours before. But stranger things have happened, and this is still a really good football team. I still very much believe that, even if they haven't been a great elite football team to this point. But there's a lot of season left, plenty of time to get on a roll, and you just don't know what's going to happen around the league. I mean, you don't predict injuries. You don't wish injuries. That's Bush League. That's a Bush League mentality. But you know they're going to happen.
Like, the Steelers come in with Devin Bush, right? Now we have Stanley, right? I mean, just go around the league for every Dak Prescott, and then there's the bench quarterbacks, and in places where teams have made all these transitions. And I mean, Tyrod Taylor got benched because a doctor stuck a needle into his chest. I mean, it's crazy, right? So the ebbs and flows of the league and where it's supposed to be, but young stars emerging, young quarterbacks emerging, old quarterbacks, whether it's Breeze or Rodgers or Brady or Roethlisberger, still sort of banging around and available. It's good. The league is good. The league is one of the only normal things going on in my life right now.
It's been fun. It really has been. Sunday's loss notwithstanding, but it's been fun. And I think there's still plenty of fun ahead. I don't know if that's going to end with the Ravens raising the Lombardi Trophy. And to your point, losing Ronnie Stanley is not a loss that you can just be dismissive of, but see what happens. And you look at the remaining schedule, November is tough. There's no question about that. But if you can navigate these next 4 weeks and say win 3 out of 4, I don't think that's out of the question, but I don't think that's a given either. But if you win 3 of the next 4, let's say, and then you get into December, home against Dallas on a Thursday night, at Cleveland on a Monday night, home against Jacksonville, home against the Giants, at Cincinnati. It's not exactly a murderer's row right there. So if they can take care of business over these next 3 to 4 weeks, not get in a position where this thing snowballs, as disappointing as Sunday was, they're going to be right there. Doesn't mean they're going to be the number 1 seed, but they will be in position to, if you take care of your business, and then, you have to hope that Pittsburgh's going to lose a couple games at some point. I mean, I don't think the Steelers are going 16-0, regardless of what happens Sunday. I don't think they're going 15-1, with their only loss being to the Ravens. I think they're going to lose at least a couple games. That's where the Ravens have to take advantage, and that's where we do have to admit their margin for error is very small at this point when you're talking about Kansas City and Pittsburgh now in terms of the AFC seeding race and the AFC North.
Maybe this is the year I can root for the Browns and for the Bengals to beat the Steelers, and they might actually do it.
Maybe they
do. You know
do.
what I mean?
Who
like
knows?
I've been rooting for the Browns and the Bengals to beat the Steelers since childhood. You know what I mean? So, and they never do. So maybe this gives me a little extra oomph to watch some football around here. Luke Jones can be found at Owings Mills watching football in the backfields and trying to figure out who's healthy and who's not, and who's in and who's out. You'll find all that on the WNST text service presented by our friends at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis is going to be here on Thursday from 3 until 5 doing the Dennis Colazzo Show. And on my program, and now on the front of BaltimorePositive.com for every time Dennis comes on and extols the virtues of good defense, which I'm sure he'll be doing all week long here. You can find Luke and I out in social media on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and together now under one platform at BaltimorePositive.com. We have been playing with the back end of our website, the PHP, and the crashability. When this site began, the site was crashing. Now that the segment's ending, the site's back up. So have at it, Baltimore Positive. All of it brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast, and the tastiest fried chicken and the Western fries, hand-cut bread right in the store, with ketchup or gravy or cheese. They're delicious. It's Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570. We'll continue to talk football, this election, and making Baltimore better. We are Baltimore Positive.